Well, can I test that out? How are we, Camp No Fear? Yeah, okay, it's true. It's true, it works. Thanks, brother, I appreciate that. So yeah, man, I'm a camper. I've sat where you guys are sitting. I've been a camper. I remember this was like a number of years ago, 10 or so years ago. But my memories of being a camper would be like, I remember how fun the games were. I think Camp No Fear just do it different. You guys just do it different. I've got to be careful of that. CNF, does that still? No, that's all right. CNF does it different with the camp games. And I remember having so much fun. There was food and mush and just like completely different, definitely to a school camp, but even to like other youth camps, I feel. I remember boys' cabins especially, the stink in a boys' cabin. Like, it smells like adventure, it smells like participation, it's thinly masked by whoever's got the strongest deodorant or antiperspirant, but the smell of the cabin. I remember my leaders. One of the years I had a couple of leaders named Kane and Pete, and I remember being just so blessed by those guys. They were so encouraging. They gave us the time of the day. It surprised me how much attention they'd give us to make sure we were having a good time, to make sure we were involved, to lead the discussion with us. I remember Kane was like a pretty hairy guy, and he'd shaved his chest for some reason for camp. I don't know if that was for aerodynamics in the games or he'd lost a bet or what it was, but he was rashing up, and so we got pretty vulnerable just hearing about how itchy his chest was at the time. But Kane and Pete, the leaders, I remember being in this very room and having quite significant moments in the night sessions, actually. Moments where I'd be prayed for by people in the room, moments where I'd been encouraged by people in the room, moments where I'd encountered the living God in my life. And I remember going outside after a night session at Camp No Fear and lying on the grass outside here in the dark after a session, right? Just because I needed a moment, just me and God, just to process what was going on. I felt so thankful to Him, how much He knew me, how close He was to me. I was just processing after a night session. So significant moments that I remember going on. And then I've been a leader. I've been a Camp No Fear leader as well. Had a couple of years of that as well. That was my wife that was up there. So her and I, we led together before my family moved up north to a different church. But my memories being a leader, similar in this very room, just seeing the young people that I was leading encountering God and having these moments where they'd break down, they'd weep. They were getting encouraged in a way that they hadn't before. Camp No Fear just like cuts through the normal life and gives you a chance to just open up something new. My other memory as a leader were boys in my group getting so sunburned that they were like thick on the shoulders of blisters and like weeping, just horrid stuff, making their shirts wet. I remember being in the nurse's cabin with those guys. They were like dehydrated and stuff. So if I can give you some advice as a camper, as a leader, someone that's been in your shoes, open yourself up more than usual this weekend and be more sun smart than usual this weekend. That'd be my two tips for you. There we go. Something for everyone there. But I've got high hopes for you this weekend. I know the people that put this camp on, your leadership team. Can we give it up for the leaders that have been going since early this morning? They have high hopes for you this weekend as well. And I know some of you have come in with really high hopes of Camp No Fear. I forgot that one. That got me by surprise. There are some people that might come in a bit fresh. This might be your first camp. You might know what to expect. You might have been dragged along. Sometimes there are people at a youth camp that just got sort of sent along. They might not have as high hopes as other people. I recognize that. There's a whole bunch in a room like this. There might be people in this room that actually don't have hopes for much. They don't have hopes for much. Our last few years have shown us that the shifting sands of the world can cause us to be a bit fearful about putting our hope in anything. And so I recognize there might be people here that are feeling a bit like that, like they're a bit scared to look forward too much, to open themselves up, to think too hard, because friendships can be pretty fickle. We can have hopes for how our friends are going to work out. They can be pretty up and down. Family can be pretty up and down for some of us, sometimes maybe more down than up. We're trying to balance school grades to make a future and carve that out for ourselves. We've got a few plates on the spin. And mental health might be taking a hit as a result. of those sort of things. Maybe we turn ourselves a bit more to screens to get a bit of retreat and relief from the hardships of life, only to be reminded that my profile's not as hot as yours. My YouTube channel's not humming yet. I haven't actually started mine, and it might, you know what I mean? There can just be like, it gets hard sometimes. It's hard to put our hope in things. So I want to look at that tonight. I want to examine that. Why is it that what we put our hopes in keep letting us down, keep failing us, and what we can do about that? That's a bit of where we're heading tonight. Can I go to my first slide, guys at the back? I want to tell you about this beautiful wedding that I was at lately, right? When I think about hopes, I think of a bride and groom planning their wedding, because how much, like, have you ever been part of a wedding being planned and they're just like tightly crossing their fingers that this day is going to plan out exactly as they'd hoped? They might have thought about it for a long, long time. This is a beautiful wedding that I was at, and I want to tell you this bit from the bride's perspective, because she had high hopes for this day, right? It was outdoors, which is a risk, right? Hope is risky. It was an outdoor wedding. You're at the mercy of the weather. She pulls up in her car. She's looking her best in her gown and hair and makeup and all that stuff. She pulls up in the car and she sees everyone sitting out there in an outdoor beautiful area. The weather was perfect. The sun was coming through the trees just right. And we were all out on, like, they'd had to bump in all the outdoor pews of the wedding that we're all sitting in, these wooden pews. And then what do you call the archway? Sorry? Arbor, thank you, arbor, that the people stand in front of. That was there, and her groom was at the front of the aisle, and the celebrant. All looked good. So she's getting loaded out of the car. She's fashionably late, ready to come down the aisle. The music's playing. And one of her best friends says to her, "We just witnessed the craziest, most gruesome scene here. It was crazy. It flipped everyone out. Anyway, I'll tell you about it afterwards. Enjoy the aisle." She's like, "Excuse me, what? It looks fine. What happened?" And I can tell you from the perspective of someone who was in a pew what had just gone down. All right, nature being nature, we're sitting there waiting for the bride to arrive in these pews, and there's this beautiful, like, gum tree that's kind of carving out the aisle. And this kookaburra lands on this tree. Kookaburra lands in the old gum tree. And people start sort of gasping from behind me, and then you hear this, like, clicking sound coming from the kookaburra, and we looked up, and kookaburras, they're meat eaters. Did you know that? And it had caught some lunch, and it was sitting there on the tree branch, trigger warning, slapping its prey that it had just caught to kill it on the tree branch. That was the clicking sound. The prey, the food that it had caught, the lunch this kookaburra was eating, a baby duck. A baby duck, and it's slapping it against the tree above this wedding. People are starting to gasp, and the baby duck starts to split open. Blood is dripping down, and bits of intestine. This duck is like taking a beating on the tree right above the wedding. So we're all sitting there in our ironed white shirts, in our beautiful dresses, as blood and guts start raining down on the wedding guests. So we're diving out the way, clearing these pews, and then the brother of the bride is like, "We can't have this. My sister's about to arrive." He starts throwing his water bottle up at the kookaburra to try and hit it, to scare it away. He can't hit it after ages. And then there's like this celebration sound, because finally the duckling, it was well and truly dead, but the kookaburra was satisfied, cocked its head back, swallowed the baby duck. The craziness was over. So we then have to, like, swoop in and wipe blood and intestines and stuff off the pews, so that people can take their seats again and sit back down. The kookaburra ended up staying there for the whole wedding. It pooed right down the back of this chick that was about to get up and do a talk. So she had to, like, get her jacket off, and it was crazy. Anyway, so the bride, she had pinned her hopes of how this day was going to go. The moment, how beautiful, taking in the bride, and we're all just like wiping tears out of our eyes as she's coming down, because we just witnessed nature being nature. Disappointment is when your hopes splat up against reality. Disappointment is the baby duck guts coming down on how you anticipated things were going to go. And if we can go on my next slide, I want to recognize that hope is risky. Hope is risky. It's risky to pin your hopes on something. It might be your wedding day, it might be how this year's going to go. But disappointment comes. We're scared of disappointment. We don't want to face that. But I believe that we want to hope for something that's worth persevering for. Right? Can we go next slide again? Have you ever had those stories in like sport, or you see them, where someone like pushes beyond where people would normally bail because they're so set, like the great race, they're so set on what's at the other end of it that they're pushing beyond the normal limits. There are people here with like casts on and wheelchairs and stuff at Camp No Fear. I feel like there's heaps of injured people. How sick is that? It's worth it. I said to these guys, man, you just had surgery a couple of days ago, and they were like, can't miss camp, got to be here. But you see these, so this is in the late 1900s, this person was in the Olympics, 1996, I was alive, you might not have been. This lady's name's Kerri Strug, and she was a gymnast for the US team, right? And so she did her second to last run. She was one of those ones that does the vault and the flips, and then you land in front of the judges. And she did this crazy ankle injury and busted all these tendons in her ankle. She was on track to win gold for the USA. And so she then went back and fronted up at the end of the vault because she was so set on getting that gold medal for her country that it was worth persevering with torn ligaments in her ankle. So she mustered up like a bit of a jogging run, got to the vault, launched off it, landed on a one good foot, did the thing to the judges, and then collapsed on the floor in pain. I just feel like that does something in you, right? When you see a moment like that, I want something like she wants that gold medal. I want to hitch my hopes on something like Kerri Strug does. Gary Ablett Jr. He's a friend of Camp No Fear. This is the 2020 Grand Final. Any Tigers fans in the room? Tigers fans, okay. Gee, that was nearly as loud as a Camp No Fear chant. So Tigers fan. But Gaz, this is his final game. He's a legend of the game, arguably the greatest AFL player to ever play the game. He's playing in his final game against the Tigers, and in the opening minutes of the game, it's 0-0, and he fractures his shoulder, breaks a bone in his shoulder. And everyone's like, yeah, it's the Cinderella story. Imagine if his final game of this illustrious career finished with a premiership cup for the Cats. And they take him off the ground, and he's wincing and injured. The trainers take him off. Heartbreaking scene. Until a few minutes later into the game, I'm sure with painkillers to help him do it, he re-enters the match, because he doesn't want his final game to go out on an injury. And he plays clearly maimed, clearly in so much pain, but so much did he want to help his team get across the line for a premiership. He didn't want to go out like that. Doesn't that do something in you to see those kind of moments? You're like, I want something like Gaz wants the premiership. I want something like this gymnast, Kerri Strug. It does something in us. I believe that we want to hope, even though it's risky. We want to hope for things desperately enough that it's worth putting everything on the line for. And when I think about these kind of stories, it reminds me that whatever we hope for, whatever's at the end of our race, the end of our runway, the thing that we're aiming toward, hoping for, it changes the way that we think, changes like our worldview, the way we see the world around us, right? Normally, if you and I busted tendons in our ankle, none of us would go and vault again in a gym, right? You wouldn't do it. It's just a stupid thing to do. But if the hope is strong enough, then you disregard the rest. You don't see the world the same way because what you want so badly is at the end of you disregarding your own personal safety and doing it again. Same with Gaz in the field, right? If it's strong enough, it changes the way we see the world. That's the same with you and I, with whatever we hope for. What we're aiming for, what we're hitching our hopes against, it'll change how we see the world, it'll change how we act, how we see people in our worlds, what we make an enemy of. So what I want to do today, just in looking at why what we hope for lets us down and what we can do about that, look at the most common hopes that people hitch onto and figure out what the problem is with them. And if there is a hope that we can attach to, right? So number one, what I want to look at is this hope, next slide, of feeling good, right? This is pleasure seeking. If you're a scientific person, you might say the hedonistic worldview, right? I just want to do what feels good to me. These are the kind of people, the most common thing for the generation that we are all in is that we want financial independence to retire early. We want to get a house paid off so we can travel and do our bucket list stuff. There's food to eat. There's people to meet. There's places to see. We want to do all the things in life. We want to feel good. And when we don't think about it too much, this tends to be what we aim for. Feeling good. We want to retire early. and tick it all off, right? We see the world as our playground. It's there to be explored, and I'd be missing out if I didn't go and explore it. And we tend to see as the enemy anything that prevents us from pleasure, which might be rules, it might be people that stop us from having fun and enjoying, it might be institutions, like anything that's going to hamper my ability to feel pleasure, I'm going to make the enemy and I'm going to butt against. But as I told you, what we put our hope in, it doesn't leave us untouched. And so this kind of person, you might know them, might say something like, help me to create a world where there are less rules and more fun. You might have one of them that you sit next to in class at school. This hope and this worldview will tend to say, like, just chill out. Like, stop hassling me, stop thinking too hard about it. Let's just do it. Let's just have fun. Let's enjoy. A friend of mine, Dave, any tradies in the room? Anyone that wants to be a tradie one day? You're in the fluoros already. Very good. Yeah, you're halfway there. Dave was in my year level at school. He was one of the first people to kind of get into the kind of career he was going to be in, because tradies would be an apprentice almost straight out of year 10 sometimes, right? And so I remember Dave finishing his trade school, doing his apprenticeship, and then realizing one day that what he's doing today, like he's on the tools, he's building, might be what he does for the next 40 years of his life. And the rest of us were still in high school, still like had uni ahead of us and stuff, so we kind of thought, life might change. But he realized, I'm doing what I might do for the next 40 years, and to be honest, I thought it would feel different. I thought I would feel different. And so he was one of the first mates that came to me, knew that I was a Christian, and was like, hey man, I know you talk about God, I know you talk about church and life, you think a little differently than other people do. And I'm kind of starting to ask the big questions, to be honest, in my life since getting into my job. Like, is there more to life than this, that kind of thing. And he was one of the first mates that had that realization, because you come to the end and you think, when I get that next thing, I'm going to feel different. When I get that new whatever product, when my girlfriend is this, when I'm married, when I have the house, I'm going to feel different. But the harsh reality is that wherever you are, there you are, right? Like, wherever you get to, you're still there, you're still you. And we think that it will feel different, but it doesn't always. This is Pleasure Seekers. Next quote. Do you guys all know Jim Carrey? The actor? What a boss, right? Look at those characters that he's played. He said this quote, I think everyone should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see it's not the answer. This is a guy that's been top of the hill, like Hollywood's elite, rich, famous, he's done it all. And he says, I wish everyone could feel this and realize that wherever they get to, they're still there. Like, it's not the answer. It's not the answer, pleasure seeking. Go to the next one. Number 2 of 4 things that we tend to put our hope in might be kindness, might be doing good stuff. You might say the other one's selfish. It's all about me and getting from the world. I want to give to the world. I want to make the world a better place. I want to do kind things, which is good. That's a good thing, right? Don't hear me wrong. We want to make the world a better place, and so therefore we might see the world as a good place, but with bad people kind of wrecking it. That's kind of our worldview. That's how we might see it. So therefore, I'm going to make an enemy out of anyone that doesn't think the same way I do, because I feel like if I just had enough time and enough people thought like me, we could actually fix this world. We could make it a better place, right? Have you met this kind of person too? We might be this kind of person at different times. We see the world as good, but wrecked by people not thinking well enough. So we kind of think if people were educated better, if our schools educated people to think like I think, or if our like industries educated people better and people thought a bit harder, I'm making an enemy out of anyone that's greedy or anyone that's ignorant, that doesn't think like I think. And so that can make us really angry at the world around us. Like, people just don't think right. They're ignorant. And if they spent more time and thought like me, then we'd fix this world. So it's a good thing to be kind, obviously. But if we fix our hope on that, we make that our mission, I think it'll leave us hungry too. Because my idea of good might be different than yours. We're all kind of making this up as we go along. I think it'll leave us hungry too. So this is a good thing, but I think it can leave us angry. Blaming institutions. The first people might blame the stuff. They might say, my job should be better than this. I'm going to quit it. I'm going to move. They might say, my wife should make me feel better than this. I'm going to quit her and upgrade. My husband, my kids, like whatever it might be, I'm going to blame the stuff. This make the world a better place might blame the institutions and say, I'm angry. at the church. I'm angry at the government, the tax man. I'm angry at the people that make the world worse. Number 3, I'm looking here, is peace. You might say, it's too tough to satisfy my desires. I've done that. I know that that's not the answer. Jim Carrey told me so. You might say, I know that I can't make the world a better place. It won't change fast enough. It won't change well enough. So I'm just going to focus on me. If I can get myself right, if I can have an inner peace, sitting right with myself, then I feel like I'm okay with that. The world is a bit of a bad place out there. That's kind of how I see the world. The world's a bad place. It's got trauma, discomfort, mental health issues, things that will trigger me, like bad stuff. The world is bad. I just want to kind of have a cozy and comfortable existence where I can at least find some peace. And I think that worldview can work for a little bit, like they all can, but I think eventually it leaves us angry at ourselves for not being able to maintain a level of good feeling and a level of inner peace, that we wanted to at least have our own camp feeling good and we couldn't even do that. It leads to us feeling dissatisfied. We're disconnected from the world out there. We're not making a big difference. So this is another one that people, especially this generation, tend to hitch onto with their hope is peace. And the final one, which is maybe the most cynical of the 4, this is retreat. This is thinking, look, it's all stuffed. There's no hope for the world out there. There's not even hope really for me, my peace, my mental health. The world's wrecked. Like there's not enough pleasure out there to go see. So what I'm just going to do is cut myself off from it all. I'm just going to reinvent myself generally online, right? This might be the heavy gamers. This might be the people that exist on YouTube. They might be like, where's this metaverse at? I thought that was closer. I thought that was coming. It's not around. I want to reinvent myself online. Your 4chans, your Snapchats, your Instagrams, just soaking up into retreat mode because the world out there is tough. This is a cynical person. Cut ourselves off. Leave me alone. So if we go next slide, hope is risky. I recognize hope is risky. This is a smart guy. How can you not respect a guy who has a mustache like that? Like, tell me if he spoke to you and said any words, you'd be like, I don't think that's true. Like, obviously he's researched it, twisted while he spoke. But this is Friedrich Nietzsche, and he says, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. What? I just put that into normal speak. If you have a good enough goal, you can face any challenges. If you have a good enough thing that you're hoping for, it can ride the waves and you won't get knocked around because the goal is strong enough. Like how athletes could do for a day. I know that Kerry Strug and Gary Ablett woke up the next morning. And I don't know if the Premiership Cup or the gold medal was still there to motivate them. What do they hitch their hope onto now? I hope more than just pieces of metal. I hope they had something else that could ride it out. If you have a good enough goal, you can face any challenges. And here's my simple point tonight. I want you, Camp No Fear camper, I want you to hope in what can hold you. I want you to hope in what can hold you. I don't want you to live an existence when you leave camp, go back to life and family and school, get distracted again, fall into one of those 4 that we just looked at, and hope that'll like work out differently for you than it does for everyone else. I want you to hope in what can hold you. I want you to fix yourself onto something that won't let you down, that won't sift under your feet, that you can find something that's worth pursuing, and that you can say, it's worth laying everything in my life down for this. That's how much I believe in what I'm getting after. My great race has a great goal at the end, and it's worth me running after it. It's worth me changing my worldview for. It's worth pursuing. It's worth doing on a bung ankle, right? I'm after this thing. I think we want that. And I want that for you. I want you to hope in what can hold you. Can we go next slide? Here's some of the things that the Bible says. And the reason I've gone here is because it's my belief in my own life that the only thing that can hold me is living a life that pleases God. That's what I've hitched my hope onto. And I want to make a bit of a case for you that the God of the Bible, this camp, what we stand for here, pursuing Jesus, this is what can hold me. I believe this is the only thing, the only hope. And I want to make a bit of a case for you here. The God of the Bible. So God in the Bible says, I know the plans that I have for you. Plans for welfare and not for evil. To give you a future and a hope. A future and a hope. This is God talking to his people. Can we go next slide? This is Paul, who's a guy who wrote like a bunch of the end of the book of the Bible. He says, may the God of fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him. He's writing this to the church in Rome, so that you may overflow with the God of hope, he calls him. The God of hope, like the source of hope. And he wants us to overflow with hope and be filled with joy and peace. Next one. This is a man called Isaiah in the Bible. They who in the Lord will renew their strength. They'll soar on wings like eagles. They'll run and not grow weary. They'll walk and not faint. When we hope in the Lord, it's like a source of strength for us. Incredible. Next one. This is the Apostle Peter. Another guy like Paul, wrote some of the Bible, wrote a letter. He says, always be prepared to give a reason for that's within you. It's like he's saying to the Christians, saying to the people he's writing to, there's going to be a hope within you that people will ask questions about. People will say, like, what's the deal with what you believe? You seem different than other people in my life. You seem like you have a different hope. And he's saying, when they come with that question, be prepared to give the reason for the hope that's within you. And that reason is Jesus. Following Jesus, hitching your cart onto Jesus. He expects that will draw attention. Can we go to the next one? When Jesus is teaching, he says, people that hear my words and put them into practice, they're like people that build their house on a rock. They have a firm foundation. The people that hear my words, hear my teaching, but don't put them into practice, just continue to go after maybe what the world puts in front of us, continue to search after or hitch my hope onto these other things that I've spoken about. They're like people that build their house on a foundation of sand, shifting sand. And it might stand for a little while, but when the storms come, when anything's thrown against it, what's going to happen to that house? That's going to fall. That's a legit photo in New South Wales, by the way. Just a little Easter egg for you. Next slide. So feeling good, kindness, peace, retreat, when we hold that up against the comparison of a life hitching our hope onto following Jesus. When I live to please God, I can expect that sometimes I might feel good, and that's a great thing. I enjoy food. I enjoy tasting things and meeting people. I enjoy laughing. I'm here on Camp No Fear because I know that this is a fun place to be, right? Of course we enjoy feeling good. We enjoy, the riches of life. Doesn't mean you're not going to have that. Doesn't mean you are. But it means that when I'm seeking to please God with my life, when those things come, I enjoy them. But when those things are not there, I understand that I'm not derailed. I'm not thrown off because I have a greater hope than just feeling good. That's not what I've hitched my hope onto. Kindness. Obviously, Jesus said the most important thing is to love God and love people. All the other commandments are captured in these. Love God and love people. So of course, he wants us to do good, right? But when I've hitched my hope onto living a life that pleases God, I know that there'll be times when I can change the world and make it good and obviously love on people. That's going to be a main thing as I'm following God. But I know that if I can't change the world, I know that the world's not going to change just from me. The world's not going to change from more people thinking like me. I know that the world is broken enough that it needs a savior. So I'm not going to be derailed when things don't go my way. I'll try my best, but my hope is hitched onto living a life that pleases God. When I live a life that pleases God, it says that the God of peace will fill me with all hope. And so I can expect that as I trust in God more, my peace will rise inside. But I know that there'll be times where I'm uncomfortable. There might be times where I'm traumatized, where things don't go my way. I will not be derailed because my hope is hitched on living a life that pleases God and not on having inner peace. I know it will come and go. You know, they say that the Bible is written to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. It does both of those things. If you've got a book or people are like prophets in the Bible, if they're trying to afflict the comfortable, there's going to be a feeling of discomfort, right? We can expect that. When we hitch our hope onto pleasing God with our life, we can handle the discomfort. We know it's going to come, right? And finally, retreat. If I'm writing this whole world off and saying, I just want to reinvent myself elsewhere, I know that if I hitch my hope onto living a life that pleases God, I'm living in my design. I'm living in how he's made me to be, how he's purposed me. So I'm not going to want to retreat. I'm not going to want to reinvent myself because I think you'll find, if we hitch our hope on a life that pleases God, we're living within our design. we'll be happy with who we are. We want to retreat from this body, this world, because we're living with who God made us to be. This is what I want to leave you with tonight. This is a bit of a tool we can look at in cabin time a bit later on. Can we go to the tree? Here's a tree. Seen one of these? I've broken the tree into 4, right? And this has been a helpful tool in my life just to think about how I think about God. Because I know that there are 2 types of people in the room at this point in time. There are people who don't have a personal relationship with God. They don't know God well, don't know this Jesus thing. Might have heard about him. They might talk about him at school, but it might not be their reality. And so there might be some beliefs that that kind of person that doesn't know God personally has about God. Some beliefs about who he is. They may be correct, they may be incorrect, right? But they'll have some beliefs about who God is. And the other type of person in the room will be people that do have a personal relationship with God already. Might have been for a long time, might have been for a short time, might be working things out like we all are. And I recognize that even people that follow Jesus, we're all a work in progress. You don't say, yeah, I'm going to trust Jesus for the rest of my life, and there's this download of all the information. You think right, you do right, you're all perfect. It's a process, right? We're all in process. And so even those that have a personal relationship with God can use this just to examine what we think about God, what we believe about him. So if we go to the next slide, the roots there, I want to represent who God is. What's our belief about who God is? You might say to yourself, God is love. I've heard that he's love. That's who I believe God is. You might say that he is our creator. You might say, I don't like him. You might say he's evil. Whatever it might be. That's who God is. Next slide. Up from the roots, we know that it's impossible for a trunk not to come from the roots. The roots define what the tree is. So the trunk, in light of who you believe God is, what's he done to prove what you believe about him? So you might say, I believe he's love. He pursues a relationship with us. He died for our sins. You might say, because he's our creator, he created me. He made me with purpose. He designed me. You might say because he's evil, if that's your belief, then he's manipulative and he sends people to hell. Like, what's he done in light of who he is? Our final one there, branches, sorry, second last, not final, second last. In light of who God is and what he's done, who am I? I draw my identity from him. So using those same examples, you might say if God is love, he pursues a relationship with me, I guess I'm worth pursuing. Defining who I am by what God's done, I guess I'm wanted by God and I'm loved. You might say because God created me, if God's a creator, then I have a future. Then I have a purpose. He made me for a reason. He designed me. He's ahead of me. I'm not on my own. You might say, in light of God being evil and making us and being manipulative and stuff, if that's where you're sitting, then who am I? I'm on the run. I'm trying to escape him. I know better than he does. I have a better moral compass than God. Like that, who am I as a result of what he's done? And finally, we've got the leaves, and that's, what should I do? As a result of who I am, how am I going to live that out? What's my worldview going to be, depending on what I believe about God? So that's our final slide there, the leaves. Who am I? So you might say, if he's a loving God and he loves me, then probably I should pass that love on to others. If he's a creative God and he made me with purpose, then I should probably pursue understanding God, understanding his purpose and living into what he has created me to be, who he's created me to be. If he's an evil God and he's manipulative and I'm on the run and I know better than he does, then I should probably look to position myself against what he says. That belief about God will tell you how you should act. And I find this tool really helpful for me to use when I'm having a hard time or I'm not understanding where God is, or he might be seeming silent to me, to figure out what I should do. And I realize that what I believe about God, what the Bible says about him, is far from what I'm believing about him. So I go through this activity and it just helps me to think a bit more clearly. So you might like to do that in your cabin groups tonight. All right, a little tool for you, a little bonus for Camp No Fear. So wear sunblock. Open yourselves up a little bit this week. There's a little tool. Let me pray for you before we get back into worship. God, I believe that there is not a person in this room that is not here with good purpose. There's not a person who is in this room that's here by mistake. You know, every person that's sitting on the floor in this room, you invited them, you go ahead of them, you know their name, you know their story. They are not by accident. You know them, you love them, and their life matters. And God, as we've looked at hope tonight, may we be a people that examine what we hope in, and may we put our hope in something that can hold us, which I believe is you. So God, do a work on hearts this weekend. We open ourselves up to the conversation, to the fun that's to come, and ultimately, I hope that you encounter people in this room this week, that we don't walk away from camp the same. And can I say to everyone here that prayer from Paul, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope. Amen.